Yeah, that was wild. That's what we wanted. Okay. Now we are. Can you guys see how that looks good? And can they see this okay?
Yes.
Oh, whew, I love it when a plan comes together. But I started adding stuff and I couldn't stop myself from adding stuff to the 50s. Now, a few of you remember the 50s better than I do, because when the 50s ended, I was 2. So I don't remember it well.
You're just a young.
Yeah, I really am. Oh, I was subbing at the middle school today, and kid after kid said, you taught my parents. And I said, that's right. And then I had a couple say, you taught my grandpa and grandma. So yeah, thanks, shut up. Anyway, I have a picture. We talked about last time several things, especially I tried to do an analysis of why we started getting the kinds of movies we were getting. Why were Westerns popular again all of a sudden? And a new genre of it. And we talked about the different kinds of movies and how you had to compete now with TV. And then we talked about how cars affected the movies, and drive-ins were huge. And I wish Jan were with us. I hope you're seeing this, Jan, because I delved further into drive-in movies because you said about how much you liked them. So, and I'm teasing you now, and I teased you then. This was the picture I used, but I went and found another picture. I don't want to show it to you. This is the picture.
Yeah, I remember that.
We have several people. Anybody here, raise your hand if you did this.
I did.
But that's, I didn't quite do it this way. It was like 6 boys in the trunk and no girls. That was the best I could do. But still, this guy's got it figured out. Okay, we'll just run through a quick review. By 54, we've discovered that cigarettes are bad for you, so the advertising changes. And it really goes towards things like smoke our brand instead of that brand because our brand's healthier for you. And more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. I don't know how they figured that out. And then we talked about 2 great things in 1955. Disneyland opens and McDonald's becomes a franchise. So that was an exciting kind of thing. And then we talked about automobile safety, which was largely non-existent, as you know. And Dr. Seuss. As you study more about Dr. Seuss, he never said his name Seuss. His name was, it was his mother's maiden name that he took. And what had happened is Dr. Seuss, Theodore Geisel, had been caught. Some of his friends there at the frat house brought in some booze and they got busted. And he was kicked off the school newspaper, but they couldn't do it as the editor. And so he wrote under a different voice. And he always would try to tell people, it's not Seuss, it's Seuss, it rhymes with. And so we've been saying it wrong all this time. It was Dr. Seuss.
No.
So, and we talked about some of the early American popular music that was fun and good and early on. And this is about where I think we were. Okay, the start of the 50s is just more of the 40s. The music of the 50s is still a lot of big band stuff and crooners, like, his name's not Franny Lane, it's Frankie Lane, sorry. Frankie Lane, Nat King Cole, a great crooner, and of course Frank Sinatra, maybe the best of all, although, there, others could be put up here too, of course. Dean Martin is another one I think of. And Bing Crosby, a great crooner. They could all be here. And they're making the transition from the 40s to 50s. And the first part of the 50s, music is still dominated by these people. Rosemary Clooney, you know, she was a great singer, Rosemary Clooney.
Is she
And
related to the Clooney?
George Clooney,
Yeah.
that's his aunt.
Was that?
That's his aunt. Yeah. And so some really great ones you remember, and you can add Mitch Miller. Many of you, I believe, probably sang along with Mitch. Follow the little
Black dot.
bouncing ball. Yep, follow the bouncing ball. Okay, so this is what it was like at the first of the 50s. And then music changed. And this is a change that happens in the 50s that is still causing earthquakes today. And it was rock and roll. And it came in like this. I've got a chart made up of what created rock and roll. So it was R&B, pop, country and western, the blues, hillbilly music, and gospel all came together to create rock and roll. But what it really started with, it started in the black community. They were the ones who could seem, especially in the South, to unite all of these things into rock and roll. Now, we like to say that it was a universal, but it would become that way. But it starts out as black music, African music. And it was therefore rejected by way too many people, but not everybody. Not everybody. And these come together, and rock and roll is born, and it becomes honestly the biggest movement since Mozart. It's just huge. Why?
It was fun.
Oh, come on, but Bing Crosby was fun, I thought.
Yes, good.
Doris Day was fun, for Pete's sake. I liked her too. I liked her old movies. I thought they were all pretty fun. But this is different. And why did it change? It did have a beat, which came a lot from gospel. Okay? But why did it happen, and why did it happen then? We're going to speculate on that.
A little pot.
A what? Yes?
A little pot.
A little pot. This was not. Are doing with that music. It was Elvis. And Elvis is called the king of rock and roll, and certainly deserved. I think he still holds more top 10 hits than anybody ever has. But it's more than that. He began to play this music. And it was very upsetting to a lot of people to have a white boy playing black music. But he brings it out into the light. He brings it for everybody. And that's Elvis. And Elvis truly didn't care what color you were. He didn't care what religion you were. All he cared is that you loved the music. And he would have a mixed life of ups and downs and things, but nobody else was willing to do it at that time, and he was. Okay. Do you know some of these others?
That's Domino, is it?
This,
Not sure.
Little Richard,
what?
Little Richard.
Is it Little Richard?
This is,
not that one.
this is Little Richard here.
Yeah, Fat Domino.
That's Domino's.
Fats Domino.
Jerry Lee. Is that Jerry Lee?
What's that?
Jerry Lee.
Jerry Lee Lewis. Jerry Lee Lewis said, "Are you kidding? They can't be taking my country and western and jazzing it up without me being there." And he did. Okay. And some others.
Is that Pat Boone?
Looks like him.
I'm not sure.
Who's that?
Pat Boone.
No, not Pat Boone.
Who's the black guy on the bottom?
Pat Boone doesn't make the transition. He's never a rocker.
Yeah.
He's always a crooner. I can't remember, I'll look it up. But this is the man who names it. He's running a radio station. His name's Alan Freed. He's running a radio station in Cleveland, Ohio, and he starts getting requests from teenagers to play this Elvis guy. And then some of the others. And so he's playing black music on his radio station and getting death threats all the time. He doesn't care. And he eventually said in June of 1951, this is rock and roll. And he names it rock and roll. This is the man who names it rock and roll, Alan Freed. And this is also Alan Freed later on, but they would have studio audiences coming to listen to different groups, even listen to records. They loved it too much. And rock and roll was not segregated. It was music that blacks could listen to and whites could listen to and everybody could listen to. It took no sides. And it goes, I mean, we will talk about great civil rights leaders, both white and black, but we got to give credit to rock and roll for breaking down barriers massively. It meant that people were dancing in dance halls that were desegregated. Now, that wasn't going to happen in the Deep South, but it was going to happen all over the rest of America as this rock and roll became big. Okay, and look at that audience. You see what I'm seeing?
Who does?
With the white boy right back there. Holy smokes. And blacks out, if you start looking, it was rock and roll and it was desegregated.
You didn't know because they didn't have that.
The red, what color were those rats mostly? Black. It was just music. It wasn't black music, it was white music.
Hall of Fame is in Cleveland, Ohio, and it's a neat thing.
That's why thank you. That's why the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is in Cleveland, Ohio, because that's where Alan Freed named it and played it, and where it just began to spread like crazy. Okay, before we go on to fashion, I want to ask this: why did it change? We could almost mark it to 1955, but not quite. But right in there, it went from the crooners, big band people, the Rosemary Clooney, Frank Sinatra, and it became Elvis and Fats Domino and Jerry Lee Lewis. It went from ballroom dancing to the twist. It had a way different beat to it. Why?
Can you show us?
I can tell you, but I'm not going to, because that's too easy. You got to tell me.
Why it changed?
Why it changed. I love to throw these things in.
There was that big boom of kids.
There certainly was a baby boom, but remember, that starts in 45, so in 55, the kids are 10.
Yeah. And actually, that's when I remember starting.
What's that?
Listen to this stuff when I was young.
Could it be television? This is a good thing. Could it be television? But let's hold on a minute. What kind of music were you seeing on television?
Lawrence Welk.
Lawrence Welk, Mitch Miller,
Ed Sullivan.
Ed Sullivan. Ed Sullivan.
He brought a lot.
Do you think Ed Sullivan loved rock and roll? He hated it, but he had to cave into it eventually. He did have to cave in.
I kind of think that it was an awakening of the women's movement, the black movement, and all of this stuff together. And this may have been even the catalyst to bring all of
So this is a big mixing bowl,
Yeah,
Tom says.
we watched a documentary last night about airline stewardesses.
Oh,
So interesting, so interesting.
You know, that was a big deal.
And I remember,
yes, it was.
and it was a little bit, integrating the blacks into being stewardesses was a big deal, but it's also a women's right thing, and that would be about the same time
So
as
you're
rock and roll.
starting to see women pushing for rights.
Mhm.
Okay, excellent. And you see blacks standing up for their rights, saying things like, we fought in World War II also.
That's right.
And this is starting to change things, so that's true. I still don't think that's the answer.
We just liked it.
You had to like it, it was popular.
So, no, you had to like it because it was good.
Gwen?
Spelled wrong. But society kind of went from character-based to personality-based.
Okay, there was a lot of that was happening thanks to television and thanks to the movies. You would ask people, who is the most admired man in America, instead of saying Eisenhower, they were saying Elvis. So I think you have a good point there, Gwen. That's right. It went from more what we call character-based to personality-based. Okay?
And we just come out of the war.
I still don't think that's the total answer. But we're getting closer. We're getting towards it. I want you to see something and you'll know it immediately. Look at the crowd that Alan Freed has there coming to listen to music. All you have to do, don't tell me about their race, because they're mixed up in there. Tell me about their age.
They're 18, 20 years old.
If that.
Yeah. 15, 16, teenagers. Okay.
They have money.
Thank you, Tom, you hit it right on the head. In America's entire history, kids, clear up until they were adults, worked for the family. By that, I didn't mean they labored in the family business, but you would send a daughter out to be a servant for a family, and she would send money back to the family. The family was the main unit of production and consumption. The family is what you worked for. And kids never had their own money. It would be a rare thing for a kid to have their own money. That had to go in to help the family. But coming out of World War II, there is a boom in wealth right then. And with cars and drive-ins and restaurants, there were jobs for kids. And those kids didn't have to return that money for the family to survive. The dad could make that money. The kids could have their own money. And so what do we see? What kind of things do we see because kids have their own money? I'll tell you one, hot rods. Dad's car is really nice. Let's see how fast we can make it go.
Going buying records.
Buying records. Rock and roll happens because kids now become the number one consumer. Dad's still the number one producer, to be honest. But the kids become the number one consumers in this country.
You have car radios.
Car radios. This is nuts. Everybody owns a record player. Everybody can buy records, as you mentioned. The drivers of culture in all of American history up to this point have been adults. Adults have driven culture. And at this point, teenagers begin driving culture. What do you think? It's my theory. I think I've read it other places, so I'm going with it.
That makes sense. And then there's a lot of other things there.
Tons of other things. So as we go through stuff tonight, tell me, just look to see how teenagers become drivers of culture.
Now, do you suppose they still are?
That's the next question. Thank you.
They are now.
Thank you, Cheryl. Who drives culture today?
Government.
I don't think government drives culture.
I know.
You think it's still kids with money? Could it be changing a little bit? Could it be baby boomers like ourselves that are now deciding culture? We have more money than any people our age have ever had.
Yeah, but we're getting pretty old.
We are getting old and driving. But let me ask something. If I can ask you, Genevieve, what do you do every morning?
Get up and go run and play pickleball.
Play pickleball. Is it the youth that are driving pickleball?
No.
It's adults. Pam does too. Pam, do you see teenagers up there playing pickleball?
Only the missionaries.
Only the missionaries. Yeah, they come up and play, especially on Mondays. But honestly, it's not youth that are driving that. I'm wondering, is it changing? Is it turning upside down?
I think the youth are, the young people are still, maybe not the youth, the young people are still driving culture, because culture's changed an awful lot. in the
Okay,
last-
I'm going to ask you to talk a little louder because you're making great comments, but I'm not sure they can hear you.
Oh, I don't know if I
Oh.
can, I'm shy.
Cheryl says she really thinks it's still youth that are driving culture and not adults,
The young people.
the young people.
Because if you look around, our culture has changed greatly
It has.
from when we were.
I have a little different theory on that. I think it's Taylor Swift that's driving culture right now.
And you look at her
No,
audiences, they're all ages.
And that is crazy. I know a lady that's not that much younger than me who spent $1,000 for a ticket to a Taylor Swift concert.
For herself.
For herself. That did not include the plane flight because it wasn't in Salt Lake. And that didn't include the hotel that she stayed at.
Wasn't Taylor Swift a pop?
She was a country, she was actually country and western to start out with.
She was a child star. She's grown into, remember Miley Cyrus? No, okay. Same thing. They're child stars and they're really moral and they're really great, and then they're not.
Well, I don't think I would pay $1,000 to see her, but I might pay $1,000 to see Travis Kelce because I like him.
Well, there were people at Super Bowl that had paid $6,000 minimum up to $1 million a ticket.
Yep,
You could have seen him there.
but from far away. Okay, let's talk about women's fashion.
They used to be so awesome. I love all that stuff.
Okay, so talk to me about women's fashion.
I think the stewardesses changed women's fashion.
Okay, I think you're right. I think stewardesses
And they didn't do
and
it.
and
Companies that made.
beginning to grow a flight culture where you did business all over America and even all over the world because you could fly there now.
And they were women that could do it on their own and they didn't have to have daddy telling them
They
what
could-
to do.
and-
or
And
a brother.
and they were good at their job. They'd bring you dinner, light up your cigarette there on the plane, and
Yeah.
Well, they also knew how to do medical procedures.
yeah, everything you need to do. Well, these were some of the best fashions of the 1950s. We're going to go into this a little more too. But women's fashion, how would you say it was different from the 40s?
The swimming suit.
40s was pretty good too, actually.
Very good, I think.
I loved it.
But the 40s tended, oh, go ahead, Genevieve.
My mother used to sew all
Okay, your mother used to sew all your clothes.
my clothes. Yes. I only had 2 or 3 bought and dressed.
Did that make you feel bad?
No.
No, in fact, It kind of made you popular, didn't it?
And I had to wear dresses to school every day.
Okay.
You couldn't wear pants or shorts or anything.
That's right. And women, girls wore dresses to school until when?
Till I changed that in my high school.
Oh,
And
oh, so you're
I
responsible.
have,
Were you driving culture?
we wore mini skirts back then,
Mhm.
and when we.
So that wasn't the 50s.
No.
No.
It was not. It didn't change for a long time, because it was in the late sixties that we changed it. And they told us the reason that we couldn't wear pants, which we were able to after we changed it, was because it would distract the boys. And I thought, well, what about these miniskirts? Does that distract them?
Yeah, exactly. Gwen was in junior high when they changed the rule.
1970, but Fountain Green is a little behind the times.
So Fountain Green and Moroni, and they changed that in about 1970 and let girls wear pants.
They did it, I was in Boulder, Colorado, and we were more progressive. They changed about 1965.
Well, you were,
But no Levi's.
but you were way ahead over there. Yeah, you weren't so isolated, yeah.
No, we were more progressive with
Yeah,
IBM and all
absolutely.
that kind of stuff.
Some things to note about this fashion. The 40s, really thanks to World War II, women's clothing often resembled uniforms
Yeah.
and looked quite a lot like uniforms. But here in the 50s, they want women to look like women. So what happens to waists?
Small.
They get small.
They pull the waist in, okay, on all of these things you see that. Now, this is more of a teenager thing, obviously, and these would be more adults, but this is Marilyn Monroe and this is Marilyn Monroe. Sexy was in. Sexy was chic.
Then along came Twiggy.
Yeah, that's gonna, and when we talk about the 60s, we're gonna throw all the rules of fashion out the window. But just look at all of these things. Women needed to look like women, like they had a shape. Okay? Were they running out of cloth? What was the deal with that?
That was for riding bicycles.
That was for riding bicycles, okay?
That's to be stuck in the chain.
Yes.
Well, but this was a very acceptable casual wear. This was very acceptable chic wear, very fancy, and there was everything in between. Could a woman wear some of these, say, to a town hall meeting, a church meeting, something like that? Was that acceptable? You bet. Okay.
The other lines are different.
What's that?
Waistlines are a little different now.
You're correct. Yeah. Oh, shoot.
And what I noticed there too is that many of the women have white gloves on.
Yeah.
Excellent. This is the 40s. Doggone, you're gonna do this again.
Making noises at you too.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Now, hopefully it won't keep going, but who knows? What's different from the, no? Okay, hats were different. Oh my gosh. Stop it.
Maybe you might have to turn it off, turn it back on.
I might have to go clear out and come back into it. That's what I had to do last time. Okay, maybe it'll stay, maybe it won't. Okay. So, women's fashion in the 40s, you can see quite a lot with the shoulders and where the waist is, they're copying uniforms. And when you had women wearing pants like Katharine Hepburn here, what was different from what you were seeing in the 50s? Longer, her waist is higher. They wanted to give that longer look, okay? It's got a crease. What do those pants remind you of? How about a uniform? You've got a crease like the soldiers had, okay, that kind of thing. Here's your hemline. Where's your hemline mostly in the 40s? Below the knee, a reasonable distance below the knee. And about the same length there, but notice that other than the real sexy dresses, it's spreading out a little bit. Okay. Did any of your parents dress like this?
My mom had a red dress like that one in the middle with the black and blue
Okay.
that I remember.
Okay, now cars. Cars changed. In the 50s, cars changed. So here are cars from the 40s. I picked a couple really popular ones. 1940. In 1950, in the year 1950, there were 25 million cars on the road. By 1959, 9 years later, there were 67 million cars on the road. A lot of that had to do with teenagers having money. It did. 1 in 6 worked in the auto industry in the United States in the 1950s. 1 out of 6 workers worked in the auto industry. That blows me away.
They were all in Detroit.
Not necessarily Detroit, because Detroit had begun to spread out and had gone into Canada a little bit and into other places like Ohio. But this is what I began to notice. What did the 40s popular cars resemble?
Military.
They were rounded, they were enclosed. Okay, they were enclosed, they were rounded.
Kind of a minivan. Oh, you
They-
think the airplane?
We were copying airplanes.
Really?
The idea of this airplane, right, is it could take a licking and keep shooting back. And that was kind of the idea of these cars.
They are kind of,
They are buff. But something else happens in the 50s, and that is we come up with the jet airplane. And now look what happens to very popular cars, including my very favorite one, this one right here.
57 Chevy.
Chevy Bel Air. That is a 57 Chevy Bel Air. And I'll tell you what's different?
Little rockets.
Little rockets. Look, they're copying jet airplanes. They're copying jet airplanes. Isn't it funny how military is driving fashion?
weird.
It is weird. What drives fashion today as far as cars?
Cheap? Sorry.
I hate to say what I think it is. I disagree with it, but
What?
it's electricity.
No, they're bailing out.
Some are, because they're figuring out
Nobody buy them.
that it's not the panacea people thought it was going to be. But who knows in the future? I don't know. What came out is youth began to have their own cars. Anybody here have a car early on? Okay. That was probably 60s for you guys, but still. Hot rods became a big deal. You could buy an old rundown car and turn it into a hot rod. Gwen's dad had a Model T Ford sitting out behind his house, right? Let me get it right. And a kid came by and wanted to buy it. What's that story? Before he stole it all? What?
Is it Model T or is it Model?
It wasn't a Model A, it was a Model T.
Okay, so that, it was just parked out behind our house. And every once in a while, Dad would go out there and there'd be something missing. Like the handles would be gone. And then things kept missing. There was a seat down one time. And there was this kid who came up to me and said, hey, what would it take for you to sell me that Model T? And Dad said, well, you've already got most of it.
But the kid's intention, as I understood it, was to make a hot rod out of it. Okay? Hot rod, drag racing, NASCAR starts. It actually, the first NASCAR event is 1948, but it really gets going in the 50s. NASCAR starts in the 50s. Drive-ins, fast food, motels. Where do we get the word motel? Motor, hotel, motel, and gas stations everywhere. Cars boom the economy, and again, it's more and more being driven by young people rather than old people are driving the fashion of it. And I'll tell you what, wouldn't it be wonderful to have a 1957 Chevy Bel Air? That is.
Doesn't Pat Jones have one?
I think Pat does. Williams, Kurt Williams had one. Beautiful car. Okay, other trends of the 1950s. This was a big one, hula hoops. Hula hoops. This was kind of crazy, but it looked like it was pretty fun, and people were into it.
It was fun.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
still fun. I try and buy one once a year. I haven't done it for several years, but I buy them every year just to see if I could. Yeah.
I've lost the talent.
Well, yeah, but you gotta, if you do it, you'll get that feel.
This was something else that grows up in the 1950s, and that's soda shops. Oh, what's his title? He's a jerk. He's a soda jerk.
They tried to start one up in Helper, but it didn't last very long.
They had one here in Castledale.
Right here on this property, I think.
Yeah, you're right.
Had one in Barron too, when we first moved to.
My sister-in-law worked in this.
Well, and I have to say this, to be fair, Buchanan still have one in Ferret,
Yes.
but it doesn't work.
Yeah,
It's more a museum than it is an actual,
in their house.
yeah, working soda shop.
Nick,
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's got a Shell station or something out there too, and he's got a soda fountain in there. I mean, soda shop. And this is what they look like. And I don't know, I don't know that I've been in one like this, but I went into LT Hunter's place a lot of times, and it looked a lot like that. It looked a lot like that.
All the drugstores had a soda.
Yep. Woolworths. Did you say Woolworths?
Yeah.
Yeah, Woolworths.
They're good one. They're good french fries.
And this guy was called a jerk.
He did.
I can't help that you're a little offended by us calling somebody a jerk. But that's what they were called. That was their title, soda jerks.
Why did they do that?
I have no idea. Does anybody know?
Jerk it.
Oh, they had to jerk on the, yeah, to get the soda. And the other thing they did is they mixed it up and then put the soda water in it
With the syrup.
with
And
syrup.
they make their sodas, like Cokes and stuff, they make it that way too, and they're much better than.
And could you buy a chocolate Coke?
Yes.
No problem.
Iron Port.
Iron Port. That was so well, it tasted like rust to me, but yeah. You don't know Iron Port? It was kind of a soda. It had, to me, a rusty flavor to it.
What was it?
Did anybody else? It was like a root beer, but it was Iron Port. That was its name. Sock hops. You know, in the 40s, what did you have to have a dance?
That's cool.
A band.
Not bad.
And then poodle skirt.
Well, here, this 50s, all you needed was a record player. And you had sock hops. And at school, if it wasn't junior prom or some big important dance, you were just having an after the game dance, all you needed was records. And dancing changes. It seriously changes during this time. Because again, who's driving the culture?
You.
Oh, no. Oh! I'm just gonna get out of it right now. It's no use. If you slightly push this button wrong, it won't do what you need it to do. Okay. Then this was something else that came in. Thank you, Elvis. Thank you, wherever you are. Sideburns. Sideburns began to be kind of a big thing. Now, they would continue to grow and go out of control in the 60s and 70s. But they start in the 50s. And come on, people, you had to know someone with a hairdo like this.
Evan Nelson.
There you go. You can name somebody. But at the same time they were doing this, they were also turning to this. And this is still a leftover from the war, the military. Okay? So you were getting a crew cut, or you were getting this kind of a cut with some sideburns. And by the way, can I recommend our new barbershop here in Castledale? Because if you'll go down to him and you want a crew cut, he'll give you one. He will.
What's his name?
His name is Colton Butler.
Oh.
And he's there
Is he
by
Dustin Butler's brother?
what's that?
Dustin Butler's brother?
That would be-
No, a different Butler family entirely.
But they're related.
Are they? I didn't know that, but okay. Well, so
Well, we had Wild Root Charlie and Bushwhacks.
now you're talking. But here, finish this sentence for me. Brill Cream, a little dab.
We'll do it.
You got.
And then just have the road with the highway signs, and there would be something, and then it'd be another sign, and something, and then it keeps going. That was really cool.
That was cool. But what was the best kind of shaving cream?
Real cream.
No.
Burma Shave.
Burma shave, yeah.
Yeah, Burma Shave. Okay.
Those were advertised on billboards.
They were on every billboard around. There was Burma Shave and Brill Cream. A little dab will do you. These guys needed Brill Cream. This guy could get away with bushwhacks. Yeah.
Greasers.
The greasers.
We're going to talk about that. Oh, shoot.
Colton will even give you old fashioned razor shave too.
He will. Colton will shave you.
Oh, it's cool.
Oh, he's 22, 23. Sideburns. Okay. Now, the next thing I find totally hilarious, and I'm very sorry if this should offend any of you. I apologize. But I found it funny. And that's just because I'm weird. Fashion, right? The bullet bra. The bullet bra. We had never done anything like this before, and we've never done anything like this since.
Yeah.
Except Madonna. And I don't want her driving fashion anymore. But I have a question. Why?
They're car, yes.
You're trying to look like rockets.
They were trying to look like rockets, and look what we were doing with cars.
It's my
Same thing.
That's a Studebaker, that's correct. I mean, I can't even imagine what some poor girl would go through. if she showed up to high school like this today, for sure she'd never do it again.
Maybe get the Halloween or something.
Because people would absolutely terrorize her. And I'm not saying they shouldn't. But the bullet bra was the thing. Now that's gonna fade. We're gonna hit the 60s and the 70s where no bra. But this was fashion.
It must have gone pretty fast, though, because I don't remember.
It did. It went pretty fast, but I believe it was tied to what was happening in our spaceships that we were trying to launch, and our airplanes, our jet planes, and our cars. We were doing the same thing with cars. I guess girls had to change to something that looked like a car to attract boys at that point. I don't know.
There were two in other cars.
Yeah. Okay, here's some other fads. Cat eye sunglasses. Cat eye
And
glasses.
the regular glasses too got real pointy.
Yeah, they didn't have to just be sunglasses. You could have cat eye glasses and,
My mom has.
yeah. And, this is when the Pez dispensers started, was during this time. And then also, of course, the big thing, Letterman jackets, sometimes called varsity jackets.
You don't do that now.
You can buy them if you're a varsity player. You can buy them. But even when I was in high school in the 70s, you had to letter before they allowed you to buy them.
Those Pez dispensers have lasted all this time.
Those Pez dispensers from the 50s, if you have a really good in shape one, you have some money in your
But
hand.
they're still popular.
They are very
They
popular.
don't make them as good though.
No, they're not as tough as these. And some other funny things are happening here. What's happening here?
Classrooms.
Class pins.
Class rings, class pins, and he's probably going to take his Letterman pin and give it to her. He's going to pin her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're a couple.
TV dinners started in the 1950s. Man, they were good.
What?
But the first TV dinner is created. Shrimp, and there's chicken and turkey.
My favorite, with apple crunch.
And I'm going to be really honest. My mom cooked all the time. I mean, we ultimately had 11 kids. Of course, that's what she did. But when Dad was nice to her and wanted to give her a break, he brought home TV dinners.
12 of them?
Whatever.
Many-
You got to understand, in my family, the most kids we had at home at any one time was 9. And that was only for a very brief period of time. So mostly 7 or 8 for a long time.
That's still a lot of.
And would only have 5 chairs at the table. So when Mom calls you to dinner,
First one.
if you want to say, oh, I'll be up in a minute, too late, there's no food left. And no chair for you.
No food option.
That's true.
Yeah, I think it was, stretch a little bit. Coonskin caps. One of the great shows was Davy Crockett. And you had to have one of those. And then another thing was big was what we call the counterculture. The culture was going one way, and some other people said, that's not hep enough for me, which was a word they used, hep. And so the beatniks You know what these freaks did? They grew their hair long.
They didn't last very long.
Well, they were going to morph into hippies.
Yeah, hippie took over real quick.
They were going to morph on that. But still, look at what the 50s perception of beatniks was. They were gang members, they had guns.
But they weren't.
No, they weren't at all.
They were a little more intelligent, say they than.
And
Sorry.
they were a little more refined, kind of, in their music. I mean, they liked jazz
Yeah.
more than rock and roll. A lot of beatniks.
They read a lot, they read and they wrote. They
Yeah.
wrote a lot.
But
Wrote a
no,
lot of books.
they were grabbing wild women for illicit purposes and pointing at them. So the beatniks kind of got a bad rap, but they would be the predecessors of the hippies of the 60s. Okay. Other movements. 77 million babies were born from 1946 to 1964. That's the baby boom years. From 46 to 64, 77 million babies. We don't come close to that now in the same period of time, even though our population is 3 times bigger than it was then. The nation was growing fast and it was growing younger. And they are going to be the drivers of culture. Some of you are telling me up till now. I would like to get in an argument with you and say, I don't know, it's the baby boomers that are driving culture now. But I suspect you would probably
We're at the tail end.
win the debate. But it'd be a fun debate to have. This is another thing. A new form of art emerges. Abstract expressionism. This was by Jackson Pollock.
Yeah.
Can you feel what he's trying to say?
No,
No.
not gonna pay for it either.
This was a whole new kind of art.
Was Picasso dead?
He was earlier.
Yeah.
He was World War II and through there. La Guernica,
He
one of
did
his
some
great
beautiful
works.
work before he started getting cuckoo.
Before
He
he,
did some gorgeous, and he used to do animals and.
he was a great painter before he turned to Cubism and then began to change it and morph it. But Pollock is, and where, most of the artists were from France, Spain, other places. Now they start to come from America. The artists begin to come from America, and Jackson Pollock is the great one of the 50s, and he said, art doesn't need a message. Picasso always had a message in his art. There was always something there. He had meaning to it. Pollock says, I reject meaning. You don't have to have meaning, you just have to like it. And if you don't like it, don't buy it.
Looks like a bunch of people dancing.
Does it?
Yes.
Because that's not how he painted it. You know how Pollock painted. Yeah,
Go pay them.
he just took paint and just threw it out there.
So those people came
And to him, he
together.
said this, color is important, meaning is not important, but texture is everything. You ought to be able to go up and touch the painting and feel the texture of the paint after it's dry. And I'll tell you the funny thing about this painting, a great thing. This hung in the Louvre for 10 years, upside down. Upside down.
What medium did he use? Did he use like a can of paint?
Yes, cans of paint, yes. And a huge cloth. That painting would take up most of this wall. Huge cloth to paint on, huge. Okay, and then this is what I wanted to spend a little time talking about. Societal pressure for women to stay home and have babies produces a confining effect on many women. Can anybody agree with that or disagree with it? Tell me what you think. More women were beginning to go to work, but there was a huge societal pressure that men should provide for their families and women should stay home, take care of the house, raise the children.
It was enforced because women couldn't have money. The kids had money, the women didn't.
The kids had.
Well, the kids could go get a job, and women weren't
they couldn't get a job doing that, they wouldn't have money, so they were
I have to say, I had
imprisoned.
an aunt who in the 1950s went out and started her own company.
Who would let
They-
But that was fairly rare. And she was very successful for years with it.
The people wouldn't hire them.
Did anybody here know Ray Colton in Price? No? Okay, that was my aunt.
I didn't notice any of that myself, but I was born in 53, so
You were still pretty young.
I was pretty young. My mom went to work young.
Okay. Do you think this is a true statement or a false statement?
I think it was from family to family.
Okay. Do you think women felt a sense of freedom in the culture of the time?
Probably not.
No. Sense of
No.
freedom? No.
No, they were, there was definitely a confining effect. Because like we were watching last night with flight attendants.
Flight attendants.
That was a.
Hey, did they have, let me ask this about that documentary on flight. Did they have any rules for
Huge amount of
them?
rules.
Yeah.
Unbelievably biased.
The same rules for pilots though, right?
No.
Or the women worked, and they got
They did.
used to earning money.
They did.
And now in the 50s, they're supposed to stay home.
Put the barn back in the horse. Put the horse back in the barn. Put the genie back in the bottle. It's pretty hard.
It was the baby boom. They had so many children. What are you gonna do? You have to take care of them.
And
Families were
had babysitting, I mean, as an occupation really emerged yet? You were expected to take care of your own kid.
Right. So they were confined.
Well, hey, what about this idea of rules? Should men have rules for how women should behave?
Yes.
What are the rules,
We've
Lee?
got-
Put in the summer, put in the winter.
Well, let me share with you some rules.
The other way around.
This is an extract from a 1950 home economics book. Home economics book. The title was How to Make Your Husband Happy. Darcy's,
This is
We're
not
gonna
get
get
into some stuff here.
what's that? Yeah,
From that book of mine?
no, this is,
Yes, you've read it several times, Gwen.
Gwen has a cool book that she got, and it's so funny to read, but it's called, and maybe you've read it, Fascinating Womanhood. How to behave so you can attract a man. Because that's everything.
I thought the men were supposed to attract the women.
No,
Not according to this book, but this was from a home ec manual.
Is that when it changed?
So girls were going to gather together in their dresses, and maybe they would even have a nice necklace, pearl necklace or something, and gather into
You just
class.
have to look at the animal kingdom, and you know that men are supposed to attract the women.
Well, all I know is in the peacock. However, I also see with lions that the male lion lays around and the female lion go out and hunt the food. I don't know.
That was a mistake.
However, let's read what the rules were that they were teaching women and girls in home ec how to attract and make a husband happy. Have dinner ready, plan ahead, even the night before, to have a delicious meal on time. This is a way of letting him know that you have been thinking about him and are concerned about his needs. Most men are hungry when they come home, and the prospects of a good meal are part of the warm welcome needed. I say, get started the night before.
Yeah.
Prepare yourself. Take 15 minutes to rest so you will be refreshed when he arrives. Touch up your makeup, put a ribbon in your hair, and be fresh looking. He has just been with a lot of work-weary people. Be a little gay and a little more interesting. His boring day may need a lift. Clear away the clutter. Make one last trip through the main part of the house just before your husband arrives, gathering up school books, toys, paper, etc. Then run a dust cloth over the tables. Your husband will feel he has reached a haven of rest and order, and it will give you a lift too. Prepare the children. Take a few minutes to wash the children's hands and faces if they are small. Comb their hair, and if necessary, change their clothes. That's what you want to do throughout the day, pretty much. They are little treasures, and he would like to see them playing the part. Minimize all noise. At the time of his arrival, eliminate all noise of washer, dryer, dishwasher, or vacuum. Try to encourage the children to be quiet. Be happy to see him, greet him with a warm smile, and be glad to see him. Some don'ts. Don't greet him with problems or complaints. Don't complain if he's late for dinner. Count this as minor compared with what he might have gone through that day.
No.
Make him comfortable. Have him lean back in a comfortable chair or suggest he lie down in the bedroom. Have a cool or warm drink ready for him. Arrange his pillow and offer to take off his shoes. Speak in a low, soft, soothing, and pleasant voice. Allow him to relax and unwind. Now, for you people, this is nothing new. This is what you do every day. Listen to him, and I couldn't quite read all that. You may have something to tell him, but the something of his arrival is not the time. Let him talk first. Don't you talk first. Make the evening his. Never complain if he does not take you out to dinner or to other kinds of entertainment. Instead, try to understand his world of strain and pressure, his need to come home and relax. And finally, the goal. Try to make your home a place of peace and order, where your husband can renew himself in body and spirit. What do you think?
No.
You just ignited a bonfire.
That's not true. You know, that I bet every woman in here has done that. We have done that.
Because
Maybe
we're
not to
trained right there in
the,
the book.
maybe not to that degree.
And
But
how,
we take care of our families, we take care of our husband, we take care of the home. Every woman in here has done that and is doing that. But we're not being forced anymore. That's the difference.
Oh, they're not doing it anymore.
Well, there's a lot of them now that aren't doing it, but the ones that are in this room have done it and are doing it.
and how did it work out?
It's just, you know, I'm not saying, the thing is, we all have roles to play
Okay.
in a family.
Oh, which reminds me, another one they should have fresh baked rolls.
Yeah,
I would love that. I would love that.
But, you know, I'm not agreeing with everything there, I'm just saying,
It's happened.
it's happened, it's still happening.
Okay.
If you have a son and you want him to have a good wife, you want one like that. You don't want one like out there that won't clean house or won't cook or won't whatever. You don't
Okay.
want one that's. So the same.
Is there in today's world pressure on husbands to take a greater role in what used to be
There is.
considered
Yeah,
women's
there
work?
There is, and they should.
Is that a bad thing?
No. It's not a bad thing.
Well, that came about
It's a
because women
partnership.
did go back to work and so they began sharing the load.
Okay.
It's a partnership. The other way was a master and a slave. I was master and slave.
How do you ever change that?
You've got to be real careful because there's men who still play that game.
Okay? And that's the last file.
I'm sorry, Neil.
No, I think it's funny. I love discussion. Okay, anybody got anything to say about the 50s? Because next week we will be meeting here again. That's the 28th. And then the next one is what, the 30th, 20th, 29th, the 6th. Is that when it is, I think, of March? And we will meet that week. The week after that, I have to go back to school board meeting. But for the next 2 weeks, we'll be here and we will be on to the 60s. So anybody want to summarize the 50s?
It was a good time.
It was good. It was fun.
Yeah, it was a good time.
It was all happy days.
But I was like 10.
Fonzie.
But it's still a good time.
I had fun as a
It's
kid.
a good time. No, were things that were wrong, like that stupid book. Where did you grow up?
Pardon, where did you grow up? I grew up in Belmont, California.
Hey, and that's something we should also ask. America was different after the war. My father-in-law, Gwen's dad, was in a unit with almost all Texans. In his life, had it not been for the war, he probably never would have met a Texan. It was different. But did different parts of the United States have a bigger role in culture than other parts? Were those of you who grew up in Colorado or Utah, were we the drivers of culture?
Boulder was.
Okay, Boulder may have
Barron
been.
wasn't.
Grand Junction, I've seen Grand Junction. No, I'm
Grand
just kidding.
Junction was.
Castledale wasn't.
Yeah.
Just the one comment I kind of thought about there was that after the war, my grandpa, my dad went to war, my uncle stayed home, the family unit stayed together there until Grandpa Lloyd died. And then he had bought 3 farms, one for each of the brothers, the 3 brothers, there in the Grand Junction area. And the one farm is still owned by the one brother. Well, he's dead now.
But his family.
Is keeping on to it, hanging on to it.
Okay, excellent.
But what I was trying to say is that, you know, that's the way it was, and everybody worked for the family, for the farm and everything. And,
Yep.
And Grandma Lloyd, she took the eggs and delivered them, and any money that came in, it came to the family for the buying the farms.
But if you lived in Boulder,
Okay,
completely different experience. My family came from Kansas. They were on their own, period. And then we are on our own, and our kids are on our own. We don't have, I envy you guys that have family.
but through the 40s and into the 50s, the family unit was the major source of production and consumption. And that changes in the 50s. That's what really changes.
I
Genevieve.
think we had the best bringing up in those times because we didn't have the technology for the phones and all that. We had to get out and play together. We'd go out in the morning and play all day and then come home for supper and,
Go out and play some more.
yeah, go out and have a long.
Did you ever hear this? What are you doing home? What are you doing home already? The street lights aren't on.
We had a childhood. And
Well-
not a lot of generations had a childhood.
That's true. Go ahead, Lee.
I went to school in the 8th grade up in Provo, the worst 20 years of my life. I found out when I was up there that everything up there, until I was in the 8th grade, I could play all day, wouldn't cost me a dime. I moved to Provo for that 8th grade year. Everything I did cost me money.
Yep, everything costs money.
It's just a strange thing for me.
Okay,
It seems like, though, it's a time where there were no major conflicts.
after the Korean War, yeah.
Right, that's what I mean. After that war ended, you didn't have the civil unrest. You didn't have any major wars going on.
That was still to come, yeah.
Right. It's just kind of a period of peace, it seems like.
Well, and we sure loved Eisenhower, and he caught a lot of the credit for that kind of peace through strength. But he also is the one who pulled us out of little regional wars like Korea and like the Middle East and the Suez Canal conflict and the fighting in Greece. And he pulled us out of those things and said, that's not our business. We don't care. And I think that was well reflected in our culture and society.
One thing that struck me there while he was looking at all those cars and stuff there, though, is that this was an amazing time of infrastructure construction, you know,
Yes.
highway system. Because I remember a lot of places there when I was a youngster there, it was a gravel road, and then all of a sudden it becomes a major highway.
And the highway system, the entire freeway, the interstate system, what an incredible accomplishment.
It is.
And you know, the Russians honestly looked at us, at what we were doing in the 50s. By train.
It really gave us freedom.
It did give us a
And
lot
that
of freedom.
affected styles of clothing, that affected
Yep.
what you listened to, what you ate.
So is it fair to say that in its way, the 50s was as pivotal as World War II was for the 40s without the war?
Well, sure it was.
It changed everything.
But also by the same time, it was a melting pot. It was kind of like stuff is going on. The women's movement, the
Civil rights movement,
movement was going on, and it needed to change.
And I think you can almost put that under one umbrella called the youth movement, where youth became an economic factor in the world, in America at least.
It's interesting.
And when women were able to get jobs and have their own money, that has affected the relationship with men. They're no longer slaves, they can walk out.
Okay, we're going to talk about something else that comes along that changes it more than women getting jobs in the 60s. Anybody care to guess what that is?
The Beatles.
It was
Birth control.
not the Beatles. What?
Birth control.
Thank you. It was birth control.
Yeah, that's really a big deal.
That I was in with a group of history teachers. We were asking what had the greatest impact on all of the future of America from the 60s more than anything else. And they were guessing lots of stupid stuff. And I said, the invention and availability of birth control. And they all looked around and said, hey, the stupid kid from Emory County is right. So. I will say this, and I know this is embarrassing for me to say, but I know why my mom and dad had 11 kids. It's because my mom was hard of hearing, and mom and dad would go to bed at night, and my dad would say, do you want to go to sleep or what? And she'd say, what? And now, buddy, I'm in trouble for that one. I apologize. Mom, I'm sorry. Okay, well, we better go. I've kept you many times late, but I love it if I can let you go a little early this time. Next week, we're into the 60s, and the following week, we'll still be in the 60s. But one thing I do want to make kind of clarified just a bit. We will handle Vietnam as a whole separate thing after we're done with the 60s and 70s. We will go back and go through Vietnam as its own separate thing because it deserves a lot more inspection than just calling it an event of the 60s or 70s. It really does. And when we're talking about something that changes things, that and the civil rights movement change everything. Again. Yeah. Okay, we'll see you later. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Hey, please come and check us out on on YouTube now. We're on YouTube. This is YouTube Live. If you couldn't find us on Facebook, it's because we're over here. Thank you and good night.
Cheers. She was downside.